everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition, this latest edition of Your Money, where we are talking about all things finance, the economy. A lot of this is dedicated towards how you can save money, how you can protect your money, how you can earn money. And on that last note, one way, of course, is to become a CPA, someone who deals in money and taxes. And it's a wonderful profession. We're going to be talking about why I know that and why it is in just a moment. But first, I want to introduce our guest today. She is a local CPA, Olga Kovaliov. Olga, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So CPA, I will let you know that my dad is currently a CPA. He had his own firm, cool. And so I kind of grew up in that world. And it provides a wonderful lifestyle. So we're going to talk about a little bit about what a CPA does and whatnot. But what's your experience been like in this profession?
Sure. It's, the experience has been great. I actually didn't know I wanted to be a CPA. I didn't know I wanted to study accounting. When I was in high school, I don't think I even really truly understood what an accountant did. I always liked math, which, not a fun fact, but a lot of people think that accounting is math. It's really not. It's numbers, absolutely, but you don't need to understand math other than basic math, which accountants are horrible at. But when I started in college, I actually started as a pre-pharm major because, my mom wanted me to study medicine, and it's a great field. But a friend of mine was taking accounting. I'm like, let me give it a try. I did not like science, took a chem class. It was horrible. And, I fell in love with accounting right then and there and haven't looked back. So once, I think my second year of college, I finally found out what a CPA is, because at that point, I didn't know if I wanted to get a 2-year degree and just become a bookkeeper, because, there's so many different things you can do with accounting. You can go ahead and study finance, but I'm like, oh, there's a thing called a CPA, and, they can make a lot more money. There's a lot more potential for career growth. So I decided to stay on that track. One of the most important things for me was job security. My mom studied pharmacy when, back in the day, so she wanted me to go into the medical field, and that's great job security too. That just wasn't for me. The other one was finance, accounting. I mean, every company that you look at, every business, even if you're just a manager at a regular company, you need to understand basic accounting. So for me, it was a wonderful journey. I didn't become a CPA until after I graduated college, so I was already in my first official career as an auditor at one of the local firms here, Davy Kaplan. Great firm, by the way. They're my neighbors now at my current firm, so which is pretty cool. So I got my CPA, and that opened a bunch more doors for me, which is how I kind of transitioned into the current role that I'm at.
So if someone were exiting high school and they said, I know I want to be a CPA,
yes.
Give me an example of the fastest track they can take to get their appropriate degrees and certifications.
Well, for a CPA, and they change the rules all the time.
Yeah.
You have to go to college. You have to get 120 credits. I believe they changed that. It used to be 150, but I think you can only get 120 currently. And then you have to pass the CPA exam. There's other requirements, like certain classes that you have to take. You have to have credits in accounting. But the big one is the CPA exam, which is a 4-part exam. But I think it's great. It's very hard to pass, and most people don't pass on the first try. There's a low passing rate, but it is doable. And the great thing about it is once you get it, you have it, and there's not a lot of CPAs. There's actually a shortage of CPAs. So that drives your value up considerably once you have that CPA, especially nowadays. And I know, common question I get is, well, what if there's too many CPAs by the time I'm done with high school? I don't think so, because I think they progressively make it a little bit harder, and I'm pretty sure they curve that exam, so there's always a certain percentage that passes, but it doesn't go past that percentage, which makes our field really full of professionals, because they study, they understand that it's a time commitment. They finish the exam, they get the education requirements, they do the continuing education credits. So it's great to be a part of that profession.
So 4 or 5 years, you could be working in the field after high school if you really worked at it, or?
Yeah, once you graduate college and you pass the CPA, you can, yeah. There is a work experience component. I apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head, but, you know, as long as you're working with a CPA, you can, you know, fulfill that. So
Yeah.
it shouldn't be an issue. So I would say out of college, 6 years, yeah.
Is there a shortage of CPAs out there you had mentioned? How big is that shortage?
I think it's hard to tell because current data might not, you know, it changes very quickly. But I know a lot of CPAs right now are at retirement age. So that number is dropping significantly. Our membership at the New York State Society of CPAs has been dropping. Part of that reason is because there is just less CPAs. A lot less students are choosing to study accounting. I'm friends with a lot of the faculty at the local colleges, and they said that it is a little bit of an issue. I just don't think there's a big awareness, as much of a big an awareness about accounting as a field to study. People tend to think it's boring or you sit behind a computer, and you can, you know, that's certainly a part of it, but a lot of it is actually communicating with clients. I feel like right now I do a lot less work behind a computer and actually talking to clients, asking questions, attending events, networking. So there is that portion to it as well.
How about, from my understanding, there's also, not only is there a general shortage, but there aren't a lot of female accountants compared to men. Is that true?
That is true, yes. If you look at a typical CPA firm, and a lot of CPA firms have been really great at hiring and retaining women, but I think a lot of women just naturally drop out because, you know, they want to focus on family, which is completely fine too, but there is definitely a more male presence in business accounting. It can be a little bit more demanding, especially public accounting, where you might have busy season, you know, you have to work longer hours. So for me, it was great coming out of college to do that. I had the time, I had the energy, you know, you're working 50, 60, 70-hour weeks during busy season, which can be a lot. But for me, it was great because you get a lot more experience in a much shorter time frame. So out of college, great. And then eventually when I decided I want a family, that's when I made a career change, and I was able to do that very easily. Also, I will say for a woman especially, it's a great job. It gives you a lot of flexibility. So for a while, I was a single mom, and I was still able to have a full-time job, support my daughter. You know, she still got all the benefits that she would go to daycare. You know, I was able to, you know, provide for her, spend money on her education, etc. So that it gave me a great opportunity, and I will give a lot of credit to my firm too, because, you know, they have been flexible, and that matters too. But as an accountant, you have options, you know. At any point in time, if I wasn't satisfied, I feel like I could have found a job very easily, which is great. Whether it's part-time, full-time, finance, accounting, accounting can be audit, tax, etc. So it really opens a lot of doors.
Yeah, I would think so. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's not just tax. I think people hear accounting, it's just doing taxes, but you do more than that, correct?
Absolutely. Taxes is just one small portion, and taxes, that's usually I do a little bit of taxes for friends and family, but, you know, that's only a few months of the year. No, there's audit. You can work for a government entity. There's non-for-profits, corporate, banking, investment, finance, valuations, which is what I do now. And you can make a change, I don't want to say at any point, but almost at any point if you really want to. For example, I was an auditor. That's one set of skills right there. I did a little bit of taxes. I transitioned into business valuations, which is completely different. You value a business, you value a company, you go from preparing financial statements to valuing. So it's a different mindset, but my CPA credential allowed me to do that. And it gives me a lot of flexibility. And down the road, and I know a lot of CPAs who have done that, you know, they would transition to different, they would change career paths. It's within accounting and finance, of course, but it's very easy to navigate. Numbers are numbers. You just have to learn how to look at them a little bit differently, to analyze, look at the law changes. But it's a really great field because you can go from one thing to another thing, and there's a demand for it.
What What's evaluations mean?
Sure, that's a good question. So a business valuation is you're essentially valuing what is a business worth right now, or what is, for example, there's a stakeholder, they have a 50% interest. What is that 50% interest worth? What is a 1% interest worth in a company? What is an investment worth? So you know how there's publicly traded companies, right, like Google, Apple, etc., and they have a share price, right? We see it. Those shares are traded every single day and they change. That's essentially a value right there. So Google, for example, has, let's say, a share price of $1 per share. That's a value. That's a valuation right there. So we determine that for privately held companies a lot of times because there is no readily available public market for that. So we look at the financials of the company, historical, any projections, and we kind of determine like, hey, how much is this worth?
Boy, that's got to get complicated, right? Because it's got to be similar to assessing the value of a home. You have to look at comparables, and things like that.
Absolutely.
So in addition, you've got to have people lobbying one way or the other. I'm sure you're hired as an independent, sometimes evaluator, but people could stand to make or lose a lot of money if it's valued down or up a certain way.
Yes, usually we have to, evaluation can get audited by the IRS. So that's usually who we might have to deal with. But absolutely, and there are clients sometimes we're like, oh, we think the value should be higher. We're like, well, why? We can't just. There is a lot of judgment to it, but it has to be within reason. So yes, valuation is it's a not black and white field. It's a lot of grays and judgments, but there's always, you always have something to back it up. So, I can't just pick something and be like, oh, well, I felt like this is right. So lots of judgments, very interesting. Not for everyone though, so.
Yeah, and then with auditing, you're kind of like a detective, right? A little bit of a sleuth in a way, or how do you feel when you do something like that? Is it just kind of numbers crunching, or are you kind of trying to find something?
No, auditors, so I guess it depends. Yes, an auditor can look for something, but a traditional auditor in public accounting, all they do, their primary mission is to prepare financial statements for a company and make sure that they are not misrepresented and misstated. So yes, there are certain things that we look at, we check, but our goal is not to find something wrong, you know what I mean? So it's our goal to look at the information provided by our clients and make sure that it is reasonably correct. But if you do want to go into that kind of that's more of like a forensic accounting field, and which is a great field too, and I considered going into it. There, you might actually look for fraud, or for example, you have a small business and it burned down, and the insurance company is questioning, well, you burned down your own business because you want the insurance money. So a forensic accountant might be like, well, they had no financial motive to do that, so it can be a part of it. So that's more investigative, which is really cool portion of accounting. Audit is more, like I said, just preparing financial statements for a company, making sure that they are reasonably correct.
And then when it comes to taxes, every year it seems like the tax code changes. Yes. Do you have to stay up to date on that? How do you do that?
Absolutely. There's lots of tax changes all the time. Sometimes within, tax season, you still see new accounting, new tax changes coming out. This is where CPA firms are great. That's what they do. They have tax departments who keep an eye on these things. You go onto the IRS website, they always, issue articles or, announcements of any changes, and you want to stay up to date on that. It is really hard. Tax is a huge area, and you can specialize. There's individual taxes, there's corporate partnerships. So even there you can specialize, even though you think taxes are just one thing. It's not. It's impossible to know everything. I still do my own, like I said, my parents and some neighbors, friends, their taxes, and oftentimes I have to actually dig in and look things up and read the IRS announcements to find out if I'm doing things correctly, because things do change really, really quickly.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that surprised me when you had mentioned like, oh, I do the taxes on the side, but I'm mainly with evaluations. to do taxes on the side. The amount of updating of knowledge and programs that you need to do that as a side favor.
Yes. But I love that opportunity. That's kind of plays into the whole. I like to volunteer a lot, so I've done multiple things throughout my career, but in college, I volunteered for VITA, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, which was awesome and kind of gave me that real life experience of preparing taxes. Most of the taxes I do are fairly simple. I do often, sometimes, get new kind of people coming to me and they're like, oh, well, how do I do this? And I actually have to do some research, but it keeps me on my toes. I like what I do. Do I want to do taxes full time? Absolutely not. But I like to help when I can. So
I think we had talked about before we hit the record button that this was not your first career. Is that the?
Yeah. So I was an auditor, which is different. So and then I went into valuations, which, like I said, they're not related at all. It's completely different. So now. I used to prepare financial statements. Now I just look at them. I don't prepare them anymore. I use them in my current job. So that's what I meant as a career change. And then I also mentioned a little bit, I did consider forensic accounting at one point, which I might go into that eventually, or teaching when I'm retired. So the door's open.
So when we talk about careers, by the way, and we, my experience is, you're right, from January through April 15th, it can be a bit hectic, but it gets relaxed. I mean, you have the extensions, you have business accounts, but your summers, your falls are a little bit more chill, and that's when. Yeah, it depends on what you do. I suppose if you're doing taxes, of course.
It depends. Auditors get very busy too, more towards the end of the year. But I will say that accounting firms in general have been a lot more flexible, and they understand that you have to have a good work-life balance. So they have been better about it, and I think that's really important. And let me say this too: it doesn't matter if you're working in public accounting or let's say you just work for a private company. Like you guys, I'm sure you guys have an accounting department, right? And I'm sure there are busier times of the year for you, whether it's closing the books at the end of the year.
We keep them locked up in a windowless office.
Yes, sounds about right.
I'm just kidding. We do have accountants. They're wonderful.
When you have to do payroll at the end of the month, I'm sure everybody loves to get their paycheck. So, everybody will have busier times. So it's not just public accounting. We just have it, we say it's from January to April 15th, but for auditors, more before year end. For taxes, it's a little bit after year end. For private companies, it's year end and quarterly, sometimes monthly. So
yeah, another benefit to this, from what I've seen, because as I mentioned, my dad is a CPA, is that it's something you can take into retirement and do here and there. And so if you need a little extra income, keep your mind sharp. Again, you're good at it, you enjoy it, and so you don't ever have to fully retire if you don't want to.
No, you don't. You absolutely don't. I think when you're at that age, it's like I said, that's the age when I'm retired. I might want to teach maybe a class or two because something I might enjoy. You might consult. You might still do taxes if you really want to. You might help business owners, because I know, especially when you're starting a business, you're looking for that expertise. So that's a great thing to do when you're at that age too. Yeah, I mean, the doors are open. You can volunteer. Volunteering is always an option. For example, I am currently also on the board of directors of a local credit union, and I'm the only CPA there, which is kind of cool. Being on the board is not just about numbers, it's about so much more. But the fact is, I have that CPA, I can bring that contribution towards the board.
Yeah, absolutely. What type of advice would you have, things that you live by, because when you became a CPA, you said, I'm going to apply this to my own life, my own savings. What advice would you have for folks who aren't going to become a CPA, but it's worked for you and it might work for them?
That's a great question. So I think what I would want most people to understand is just basic accounting. So, and when I say basic accounting, it's a very broad term, but kind of like you mentioned, what is a mortgage? How do I budget? How do I save? I want to take a vacation. I want to plan a wedding. These are all things you have to apply basic accounting skills towards. Can I afford this? How do I want to save $50,000. How do I do that with my current paycheck? Do I understand what's in my current paycheck? What are my gross wages? How many taxes are being withheld? Am I going to have to pay something at the end of the year? How much am I spending currently? Do I have any recurring expenses? There's a lot of things that for me are, now common sense, but I realize not a lot of people, know these things. So my recommendation, because I've totally done this, especially before I bought my home, is to sit down and kind of, look at your past month, maybe, of credit card statements, your bank statements, see where your money goes. How much are you spending on groceries? How much is going towards your rent or, your mortgage? How much are you spending on coffee? Because that can add up really quickly. And instead of spending it on coffee at the end of the year, you might get to that, it might help you get to that goal in savings that you have. So I always say make sure you have enough to spend on your living needs, whatever they are. Then you put towards savings, and only then whatever's left over is you can, spend on your coffee or, going out, etc.
Do you have to, I would think that, and I think this happens with many professions where you have a lane that you drive in, and I know you're an evaluator, but if you were, let's say, a tax professional, where you have to say, okay, I'll offer a certain amount of financial advice, but I'm not a financial advisor. Or can you be as a CPA?
Can you be a financial advisor,
Yeah,
CPA?
Yeah, because people will come to you and you might be their only point of contact for finances.
Oh yes, I know. That's me for my parents.
Yeah, I can imagine. Right.
I always, if there is more financial advice that I think I can't provide, I will let that person know. For example, I often get a question like, well, I want to invest. What do I invest in? I'm like, I can't answer that.
Right,
That's
exactly.
That's something that somebody does full time. So you definitely want to find a good professional who specializes in that. I may be a good starting point, for example. So for my parents, same thing. I do their taxes. I fill out my parents are immigrants, so I kind of grew up being, their accountant, their attorney, their secretary, translator, everything all in one, which was kind of cool. But now, that's amplified because I am a CPA. So anytime they have a question like, well, how much do I need to be withholding from my paycheck? Well, can I set up an IRA? Can you do it for me? What's a 529 plan for, because I have two younger sisters, so my parents are saving for their college. So there are certain things that most CPAs will be able to answer, but at least, or they can give you, they can point you in the right direction at least, but you definitely want to find somebody who specializes in whatever it is that you're looking for. So for investments, you want an actual financial advisor. For taxes, you want somebody who actually does taxes. So an accountant who's been working in audit their entire life, they still may be able to help you with taxes, but they might not be able to give you actual tax advice.
We see all the advertisements for the online services, free taxes or low.
Yes.
I mean, what should people take away? I mean, for some people, is that going to be okay if they have a simple?
If it's simple, yes. If it's simple enough, if you're low income or for elderly people, there's a lot of great assistance programs. So the cash program, VITA program. So there, you can get your taxes done for free, essentially. For anybody else, if it's relatively straightforward, for example, you don't have any business interests, I don't know, you don't have any complex investments, etc. I would say yes. You have a W-2, maybe some interest, dividend income, etc. Then it should be fine to go to one of those, either free or low cost services.
Yeah, but if it's a little more complicated, what's the advantage of going to a CPA?
Because a CPA might catch things that a traditional program wouldn't. For example, I've experimented, and I've done my family's taxes, and I use the online programs. I guess I don't want to call them out by name, but I've tried a few, and they're great because, for somebody who doesn't do taxes, because they just ask you questions. They're like, okay, upload this form. Do you have this? For me, it was very difficult because as soon as there was anything more complex, as an accountant, I understood where, a certain number has to go, but I couldn't find that in that online program. So if I can't find it, in this case, this was a business. So they had, income and loss from a business. They sold a truck. If TurboTax gave me the form, for example, I would have been like, okay, it goes here. I wasn't able to do that, so it was a little bit difficult for me. So in that case, if you don't understand a question that the program is asking you, or you have more questions and you can't find a simple answer, then you want to consult a CPA, tax professional. If you have one in your neighborhood, great. That's what I am. You know, my neighborhood knows that I'm a CPA, so they ask me questions.
I bet you get in trouble walking the dog. If someone graduating, they got their certification, they got their experience, what's the general salary range if they join a firm for a CPA?
I think that changed since I started. I want to say you can start by making $50,000 to $60,000 a year as a starting salary. Once you get your CPA and you have experience, I think you can over time easily double that. Experience is key, CPA is key.
Yeah, and then a lot of people will open up their own firms, even if it's boutique.
It's harder to do that, I think, to open up a firm, because if it's a tax business, it's very easy because everybody needs to do their taxes. An actual accounting firm may be a little bit more difficult. The one thing I do always say that if you're interested in becoming an entrepreneur, so you want to have a business, you take an accounting class, at least one, to get a minor in accounting.
That's a great point.
That is the one big, so starting a business, you need to, even if you have an accountant working for you, you need to still understand it. You need to understand, because you're still going to be in control of monitoring your expenses, creating a budget for next year, making sure actually growing as a company. The accountant will just crunch the numbers for you, but you have to take control of the actual finances.
That's a great point. AI, is that changing the business? Do you see that potentially changing the business?
I will say that AI can be a tool. It won't replace us. Fun story about AI. So I had a tax question, and I called a couple of my friends who are CPAs and work in tax, and they gave me an answer, and then I had ChatGPT kind of help me. They're like, I need to calculate this, whatever it was. And it's like, okay, yeah, here you go. And I'm like, that doesn't look right. Well, what about this? They're like, oh no, let me adjust it. And I'm like, no, I think you missed this. Oh yeah, you're totally right. I missed this, and let me recalculate it. So essentially, ChatGPT was great to a certain point, but then I had to give it at least 3 or 4 more prompts to get to the same place where I was initially, when I was just trying to double check my, the logic of my thinking. So AI is great, but it's not going to replace us. There's too many changes to the rules. There's too much judgment. Even sometimes interpreting certain things, I don't think ChatGPT or other AI platforms will do really well. And it will never really replace the judgment of an accountant. Yeah,
especially with what you do. Olga, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. We absolutely hope to have you back, because I think we could go on and on about 50 different topics.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me.
All right, Olga Kovaliov talking to us today about possibly becoming an accountant yourself, a CPA, or at the very least getting to know the basics so you can help yourself through everyday life. Wonderful conversation. If you liked this, please feel free to recommend the Rochester First Streaming app to your friends and family, because we are offering not just financial advice, but we're offering stories and people's perspectives from around the community. So with that, thank you so much for watching this edition of Your Money, and I hope that you can continue to earn, save, and protect it. Take care, everyone.
Get the Rochester First Streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.